Hey guys, you are watching your anime world. How are you all? Please support to subscribe this channel for watching new interesting stories. So in this video, we will see what if Deku was neglected by heroes and became a villain. Here is short summary. All his childhood he loved heroes and he tried to love them for his whole life. He tried, he really did. He wanted to be like them, to be one of them, but it seems that them and the rest of society thought differently. They made it very clear that they did not want him, a quirkless Deku, to be a hero. So he became their villain. But before we start, if you want more stuff like this, then be sure to subscribe and like this video. And if possible share this video with your friends. Now let's start the story. It was an old memory, something that he had pushed far back to forget it. But he remembered it so clearly now. A fire. It was a year after the doctor told him he would never develop a quirk. Izuku was at the shops with his mother and father when it happened. A villain attack. There was fire, a lot of it. Him and his parents got trapped. By the time the heroes had pulled them out, the damage had already been done. He remembers the lights, the sirens, his mother being put into the ambulance, and his father in a body bag. He remembers sitting on the floor being comforted by some paramedics. Hey kid, do you have a name? Hey kid, everything is going to be alright. Hey kid, just focus on us, okay? But he didn't responded, he never did. Everything that was thrown at him, he took silently. And right there, he just didn't know what to say. And they didn't seem to mind. Hey kid, you okay? He doesn't seem to want to talk. Yes, well then, aren't you the quiet one? Izuku woke up, those old memories still playing in his mind. It was the day that everything fell apart. As he got up and got ready for school, he wondered why he remembered that specific memory. When he exited his room, he found his mother in the kitchen. She turned around when she heard him. Izuku honey, breakfast is on the table. She gave him a warm smile. Izuku remembered that after the incident, his mother had started eating her feelings. That paired with the burn scars meant that she looked very different from her past self. Her lower face, neck, arms, and legs had gotten the most scared. Izuku sat down and dug into the food his mother had made for him. It was a simple meal, some eggs, toast and bacon. Once he had finished, he headed out. On his way to Aldera Junior High, he had to mentally prepare himself for another day of torment, but he had to pull through. As he entered the school, the comments started. He tuned them out as always, but a few words still came through. Entering his classroom, he found that his desk once again had gotten even more graffiti added to it. Sighing, he just set his bag down and got ready for the first lesson. He just had to get through this year, and then he will get into UA, hopefully. Chapter text. Izuku was taking notes when the teacher pulled out a stack of paper. He explained that they were meant to be doing career planning, but what was the point since everyone was planning on being a hero? Everybody in the class started showing off their quirks, and of course, Bakugo went into a monologue. Oh Midoriya, you also signed up for the UA entrance exam. Of course, the teacher had to say that. Everyone looked at him and started laughing. Why would they let a quirkless loser like you in? Izuku heard someone say. He tried to defend himself, saying that they had changed that rule, but of course, everyone still laughed. Out of the corner of his eye, Izuku could see that Bakugo was giving him a death glare. His hands crackling with his quirk. School was over, so Izuku decided that he would take down some more notes in his hero analysis notebook. He was just about to open his phone when his notebook was grabbed from his desk. Still making these stupid books, Deku. Standing next to him, holding his notebook, was Bakugo. He had a smirk on his face, and when Izuku stood up to try and grab back the book, he pushed him back into his seat. Listen here, Deku, I'm going to be the only person from this shit school that is making it into UA, not that they will let a quirkless loser like you in. He took Izuku's notebook and burnt it using his quirk. He then threw it out the window. As he watched the book fly out the window, Izuku stood up. Look here Kachan. I will become a hero. It doesn't matter if I have a quirk or not. This was obviously the wrong thing to say as Bakugo grabbed Izuku by the shoulder and aggressively pushed him to the ground. Please, You're nothing but a quirkless nobody. He then started to walk out of the classroom. As he reached the door, he turned back towards Izuku. Well, there is one thing you can do. You can pray for a quirk in your next life and take a swan dive off the roof of the building. These words stung. He had heard many things like that, but for some reason, it hurt when it came from him. Someone who was once a close friend. But no, he would not let that drag him down. Fish food. That is what his dreams were looking like. Izuku pulled his now burnt and wet notebook out of the koi pond. But no, he will not give up. He pulled himself together as always. He started walking out of the courtyard, underneath a small overpass, when he heard a sluggish grumble behind him. When he looked, there was nothing, but suddenly, out of a sewer manhole came a thick green sludge. Before he could run, it wrapped around him, trying to push itself into his mouth. Yes, you will work. I need a skinsuit to hide. He couldn't breathe, and as his useless attempts at trying to stop the sludge, he was starting to lose consciousness. He was barely able to keep his eyes open when the sludge was blown off his body. Opening his eyes, he came face to face with All Might. As soon as he recognized who was standing above him, Izuku fully woke up, scrambling to find his notebook to get an autograph. He found it and opened it just to see that it had already been signed. He thanked All Might repeatedly. Izuku thought back to what Bakugo had said and was about to ask All Might something when he saw that he was about to jump. Without thinking, he grabbed onto his leg. When All Might realized, he landed onto a roof, telling him off for doing such a reckless thing. Izuku apologized but then said he had something very important to ask him. I was born quirkless, and I was wondering if I too can become a hero like you. Izuku looked at the hero in anticipation, waiting for his response. The man looked at him with a slight sadness in his eyes. Chapter text. No, a hero's job is far too dangerous for someone without a quirk. It's good to have dreams, but make sure they are realistic. And with that, he left. Didn't even look back at the boy looking hopelessly staring at the ground. Just like that, his whole world started to crumble again. He started to walk towards the edge of the building, looking down at a far drop. Suddenly, a loud explosion went off in the distance. Izuku looked towards the sound and saw smoke. He quickly made his way down to the bottom, the safe way, and started to run towards the chaos. Once he got there, he found heroes in a crowd. He was able to catch a glimpse of the villain. It was the some sludge villain that had attacked him. He was about to go and make notes but then remembered what All Might had said. He let out a long sigh and started to walk away. Get off me. That voice. Izuku recognized it. Without thinking, he pushed his way through the crowd and ran towards the villain and his hostage, Bakugo. Izuku quickly thought back to his notes and took off his school bag. He used all the strength he had and threw it at the villain. Somehow, it caused the villain to loosen his grip on Bakugo. Izuku took this and tried to help him out of the thick sludge. Texas smash, and with that epic announcement come a sudden gust of wind which pulled apart the sludge villain. Izuku found himself lying on the floor, Bakugo next to him. The other heroes at the scene are running to help assist. The police gathered up the villain, and paramedics checked up on Bakugo. And Izuku got scolded for getting in the way. Izuku looked towards All Might, who was being interviewed by the press. All Might, you saw me right. Tell them I was just trying to help. Izuku called out the hero, who turned towards him. Look kid, you just got in the way. Stop trying to prove something by being reckless. You're just going to get hurt. Be a cop kid. They get hate for taking the villains away. But it is a fine job. He didn't really feel anything after that. Everything just crumbled. Bakugo, of course, had to put his word in, screaming at him, saying he didn't need help. On his way back home, Bakugo once again confronted him. I didn't need your help, shitty Deku. Stop trying to be a hero. He looked like he wanted a response, expected one. But he got none. Izuku just looked at him and continued walking. When he got home, he got swept up into a worried hug from his mother. She cried about how she had seen the news and was so worried. Izuku just told her he was tired and went into his room. Chapter text. Izuku woke up to the sun in his eyes. This wasn't normal since it was a school day. He cracked open his eyes and looked at his clock. He was late. He quickly got out of bed and was about to get his school clothes out when he remembered that his mother told him last night he could have the day off. That's why his alarm didn't go off. He sat back on his bed and looked around his room. All Might, the man who he had basically worshipped. His smiling face and primary colored clothes plastered the walls of his room. Izuku remembered the day before. He did help. But no, the number one hero could only see a quirkless nobody getting in the way. He felt angry. He wanted to tear those stupid posters off the wall to burn them. But he refrained himself. His mother had spent a lot of money on them, he could just waste it. He got up and stared at them for a long time. After a bit, he carefully took them down. He carefully rolled them up and put them back into the plastic sleeves which he had kept. His walls looked bare now, but for some reason, it was nice. He didn't have that stupid smiling face staring at him. He also carefully packed up the figures and put them back into their respective boxes. He could sell these and make a lot of money doing so. Or just keep them for if he had a change of heart. He went to his small desk and opened up his laptop. He quickly pulled up the UA entrance exam requirements. He started reading through when, once again, his hopes were shattered. The hero course exams were not allowing quirkless applications. No, that can't be right. He had applied and paid. Then he remembered how Bakugo was saying how much he had to pay to get the hero course examination. It was more than he had to pay. He hadn't thought of it then, but now it made sense. He had paid for the general course exam, not the hero one. Izuku thought back to All Might's words. Be a cop, kid. They get hate for taking the villains away. But it is a fine job. So he opened another tab and typed in police schools. He waited for the results and clicked the first one. And once again, in the requirements, those stupid words he has to see everywhere. No quirkless allowed. He went out and clicked the next link, and it was the same. And the next and the next. After 7 different links, he gave up. Izuku typed in a quirkless job market. And the results came heavy. Quirkless unemployment rates. Quirkless discrimination in the workforce. Quirkless population in poverty. And all of the numbers were high. With a heavy heart, he closed his laptop and just plopped back down onto his bed. Looks like he wasn't going to be a hero after all. The world just didn't want a quirkless Deku like himself as a hero. Chapter text. Izuku had spent his whole day just laying on his bed when his mother texted him. She asked if he could get some things from the shops quickly. Izuku replied with a thumbs up and got up. He quickly got dressed into some decent clothes. It was a bit cold out, so he put on a hoodie. He walked out of his room and grabbed the grocery money that him and his mother put near the door. Exiting his apartment, he slipped on his red shoes and put up his hood. His phone dinged with a new text, and he opened it. His mom texted him the list of things she needed. He sent a thumbs up and walked down the stairs. On the way to the shops, he saw a cat dart into the nearby alleyway. He followed it, wanting to see if it was a stray. Walking into the alley, he saw the cat sitting on a metal garbage bin. He walked up to it and let it sniff his hand. Once it had, he slowly petted it. The cat had a collar, so it wasn't a stray, but he didn't mind. As he turned around, he came face to face with a man. He was not that tall and quite skinny, but his presence was still terrifying to Izuku. And what is a boy like you doing out here? The man moved closer to Izuku, who in turn moved backward. This continued until Izuku was all the way up against the wall at the end of the alley. Well, are you going to speak, or are you a quiet one? The man just laughed and grabbed Izuku's arm. He threw him to the side and then kicked Izuku's ribs. It hurt, and all he could really do was take it. After a few kicks, the man seemed to get bored. Why won't you scream? This is no fun if they don't scream. The man walked away, and Izuku slowly got up. He saw a broken pipe and decided to grab it. He wasn't really thinking, but he ran behind the man and swung it over his head. This caused the man to turn around in surprise. He had a look of confusion in his eyes, which quickly turned to fear. Hey, let's be reasonable here. But Izuku wasn't hearing it. He kept swinging the pipe over the man's head until it was bleeding. The man was now on the ground. Izuku dropped the pipe and ran. What was he thinking? He was an idiot. He knows why he kept swinging. All those built-up emotions just kept coming out. The man wasn't dead. Izuku could see that he was still breathing. But why? Why did it feel good? Izuku felt a strange feeling. He liked how the man looked at him with fear. How he had pleaded. It felt good to be on the other end for once. No bad Izuku. Hurting people was bad. He stopped at the small shop and walked in. He thought of something and then quickly ran into the restroom. He looked in the mirror, and to his relief, his face was clean. He examined his clothes and they too were clean. Walking into the store, he had realized that he could have blood on him, but luckily, he didn't. He neatened up his messy hair and pulled down his hood, then walked out the restroom. After paying for the things, he walked out of the store. On his way home, he came by the alley, which now had an ambulance pulled up beside it. Izuku felt bad and continued walking by, but he also felt proud. Like it was him who had the power, him the quirkless Deku did that. No bad Izuku. It was wrong. But then why did it feel good? Chapter text. Arriving at his apartment building, he found his mother arriving at the same time. Izuku darling. Izuku walked faster to his mother. She embraced him in a hug and gave him a kiss on the forehead. Sorry, there was some sort of accident, so I took longer to come back. He told himself that he wasn't lying, just not telling the whole truth. But he still felt bad. Once inside, he packed away the groceries while his mother prepared to make supper. Once he had finished, he turned on the TV. He switched the channel until it landed on a News 1. He let it run while he got to work on the schoolwork his mother had brought for him. He wasn't really paying much attention until his mother spoke up. Oh dear. This made him look up at what was happening on the screen. Also known as Slayer, this man was a highly wanted villain who was involved in a mass shooting just the other day. The man was found beaten in an alley. The news was showing the man that Izuku had beaten in the alley where he had left him. As he watched, he didn't feel guilt. There was some sort of pride. He had done that, him the quirkless Deku, did that. He felt powerful. That night, he lay in his bed just thinking. Was it bad? It was wrong. No, he would not do it again. With that, he fell into a dreamless sleep. The next morning, he woke to his alarm. He opened his eyes and was greeted by the unfamiliar sight of his bare room. Even though it was unfamiliar, it was somewhat more comforting than the vibrant posters. He got out of his bed and quickly got ready. Once dressed, he walked into the kitchen. He saw a note from his mother saying she had to leave early. He put it back down and got himself some cereal. As he was eating, he scrolled through the news on his phone. There wasn't much. When he was finished, he rinsed his bowl and put it in the sink. He grabbed his school bag and walked out of his apartment, locking the door behind him. Chapter text. The school day went on as normal. And even though Bakugo was still not at school, the bullying did not stop. If anything, it was worse. By the time school was finished, Izuku could feel some nasty bruises forming. For some reason, he decided to take a long way home. He just felt the need to clear his head. Oi! Izuku tensed up when he heard the voice of one of the bullies. He turned around to find one of the older students at his school. He had repeated last year, so he was a year older than everyone else. He walked up to Izuku and pushed him to the floor. Why is the quirkless loser walking this way? They were in a small underpass, one that was barely used. The bully started kicking Izuku's bag around, throwing insults at him. Izuku got up and picked up his scattered contents of his bag, and as he was stuffing it back into his bag, the bully walked by and spat on him. Your mother probably wishes she died in that fire, instead of having to raise you. Then the bully turned around and started walking away. He doesn't remember much, except red. He grabbed the thickest book he had and ran towards him. With all his strength, he brought it down on his head. When it made contact, the bully fell to the ground. Izuku looked around and saw a baseball bat in the bully's bag. He grabbed it and kept bringing it down on his head. Before he knew it, the boy was dead. Izuku looked at what he had done. He should have felt sick. He should have wanted to throw up, but he didn't. He felt powerful. He quickly started to panic. He had to hide the evidence. He looked around and saw a sewer. Perfect. The grate was old, so it had rusted, which allowed Izuku to make a gap wide enough to fit the baseball bat in. He dropped it in and heard it make a loud splash as it hit the water at the bottom. He then grabbed the rest of his things and made a run for it. Once he had reached a street where there were actually people, he slowed down. He used his plain face to just blend in. He noticed that he had some blood on his hand, so he kept it hidden. Once he got to his apartment building, he basically ran up the stairs. Inside, he quickly washed his hands in the bathroom. Once there was no evidence of any blood on his hands, he walked into his room and got dressed into some more comfortable clothing. He thought back to the bully. That specific underpass barely had people going under it, and you would have to go through it to actually see the body. This meant it would be a while before somebody found him. What was he doing, thinking about how long somebody's corpse will be found? He was not a villain. No, he was going to be a hero. Right. What was the point since there was no way he would be able to get into the hero course, and it seemed that he wouldn't even be able to live whole being quirkless. But that rush, that feeling of power when he killed that bully. It felt so good, even better than before. No, he would just keep quiet. Nobody had to know. Chapter text. It didn't come up until 3 days later. When they found the body, it was all over the news. It felt good to see people talking about something he did, even if they didn't know it was him. But it seemed to catch him eventually in the form of a broker. It was 6 days after the whole ordeal. Izuku was walking up to his apartment when he found that the front door was unlocked. His mother didn't get off from work until late, and she had gotten home early. He pushed open the door. "Hello, Mom, I'm home. I didn't know you would be H." In his living room stood not his mother but a man. He was wearing a cheap suit and had a cigarette in his mouth. In the man's hand was one of Izuku's hero analysis notebooks. "It took some time to find you. Didn't think this quiet one would be a kid." The man closed the notebook and walked towards Izuku. He extended his hand towards him. "Name's Jiren. You've caused some upset with my clients. That man you beat up in the alley is the son of one of my clients." Izuku just looked at the man in fear. Jiren got the memo and pulled back his hand. "All that there was about you, from the only person who saw what you did to Slayer, was that you were a quiet one." He gave a soft chuckle and gave the still petrified Izuku a pat on the shoulder. "Come on, I am not going to hurt you. I was, but reading some of this." He waved the notebook. "You are a smart kid. How does a job sound?" This caused Izuku to stammer back. What? This villain was offering him a job. Jiren chuckled. "This work, this analysis is some of the best work I have ever seen. You have a very, very impressive talent, and you have shown that you can kill." "Yes, I know that was you. So I want you to work for me." It was a lot. On one side, Izuku felt proud. This man wanted his talents. But this man was obviously a villain, or at least worked with them. Jiren looked at him and then took out a phone. He placed it on the table near the door and walked out. "That is a burner phone. It's untraceable. My number is already on it. Give me a call when you have made up your mind." And then he left. He stared at that phone for ages. The broker, Jiren, said his work was the best he had seen. It made Izuku feel wanted. Up till then, the only person who showed any interest towards him was his mother, and well, it was his mother. And the name Jiren called him, the quiet one, he had not spoken during that instance in the alley nor under the underpass, so was that just the name that he was going by now? He let out a sigh and picked up the phone. "Glad to hear it. I will send you an address when I'm ready for a meet-up. Welcome to the team, Quiet One." Chapter text. Now, this is impressive. Izuku and Jiren were sitting in a fancy office. Jiren was reading through some of Izuku's more detailed hero analysis books, and he was very impressed, to say the least. "So you have an analysis quirk or something?" Jiren put down the notebook and looked at Izuku, waiting for a response. Izuku looked down. Of course, that question would come up. Well, why, you see, I am actually quirkless." Jiren raised an eyebrow. "And that makes what you have done even more impressive." He gave a big smile and opened a drawer. He pulled out a file and handed it to Izuku. For your first job, something easy and somewhat personal. Izuku opened the file and saw it was Death Arms. I have a client who wants him gone and wants a strategy. Izuku nodded and just closed the file. What was he doing? He wasn't actually going to create a way to kill a hero, right? Well, you really are a quiet one, aren't you? Jiren smiled. He lit a new cigarette. Izuku didn't mean to become so quiet. It was just something he did when he got really scared. It was surprisingly easy, and by the end of the week, he had already written out 3 detailed ways in which to eliminate Death Arms without getting caught. And Jiren was happy. When Izuku handed him the plans, he read over them and gave him a massive smile. I knew I was hiring the right person. I will have your payment ready tomorrow. I have made you an account, seeing as you are still a kid. After that, he gave Izuku a laptop, also untraceable. It was to make contact with clients and with Jiren himself. Later on the news, the death of Death Arms was everywhere. And Izuku was loving it. It felt good to know he was the reason. But he had to keep the hero fanboy facade up. Chapter text. The Quiet One. A new villain that seemed to just appear out of nowhere. Over the course of 10 months, this villain started making themselves known. It started out with just deaths, with nothing really connecting them, then the signature started to show. The tongue cut out. Then the name, the Quiet One. Tsukauchi felt sick. No matter what they tried, all he could get was a name. It had been 10 months now, and with the help of Jiren, he quickly rose through the ranks. I started just as a simple strategist and was now a feared villain. During this time, he had learned how to stay a shadow, a simple whisper among the lips of the underworld. After the first month or so, he had become much more confident in his new lifestyle. During the second month, he had gotten a villain outfit. It consisted of padded and armored black pants, a black hoodie, and a face mask. He always wore the hood up, which meant that his face was completely hidden by shadows. Only thing you could see was his very green eyes. He had designed the whole thing with hidden pockets to hide all sorts of weapons. He had also mastered the art of lying, so during the day, he was just the quirkless fanboy. Even though he couldn't get into UA's hero course, he was still going to take the general studies exam. He knew he would pass it. Over the 7 months as a villain had made him far more confident in his intelligence. And being in UA would be very useful to start making notes on the new heroes. He had been doing some extra studying since the exams were in 2 weeks. He was sitting in an old warehouse in front of a gang. They wanted to put a hit out on a hero. Next to him stood Jiren, and sitting in front of him was the leader of the gang. So this pipsqueak is the Quiet One. Please, Jiren, I wanted a real hitman, not a joke. Izuku just stayed silent. He found out that doing this was what made him scary. The silence filled the room for a few minutes, and the gang members visibly started to look uncomfortable. Then he spoke. Jiren had added a voice changer to his face mask. It made his voice deeper and slightly disoriented. Well then, Jamie Martin. It's not a very Japanese name. You came to Japan 10 years ago, with your wife of 6 years, Annabeth Martin. Your quirk allows you to spit acid, although overuse causes you to get an upset stomach. Weaknesses are that your skin is not resistant to your own acid and your wife. Now shall we get started? He spoke slowly, leaning on his elbows. This made the villains back up. Why yes we should. The gang wanted a sidekick of all options dead. It was simple, too. The hero, Du, was walking home when Izuku found her. She was in civilian clothing, the same as Izuku. As he started walking up to her, he started using his acting skills. Miss, please help. His panic voice caused the hero to turn around. Is everything okay? He started running into an alley and called for her to follow. She ran after him, and as she came into the alley, he was nowhere to be seen. Kid, she suddenly felt a sharp pain. Looking down, she saw a blade exit her body. And as she fell to the ground, she looked up at the kid. On his wrist was a blade that was concealed by his sleeve. He kneeled down and whispered to her as she felt herself slipping away. Learned that trick from a video game. Then she was gone. It's too easy. He left the scene quickly and pulled out his phone. He typed a quick message to Jiren that it was done and smiled to himself. Now, this was some news. Izuku had once been a fanboy who practically worshipped All Might, and now he hated him. And now with him at UA, that was even more motivation to get in. He would be able to study this man even better, find out everything, pull apart his quirk, his strengths, and most importantly, his weakness. Izuku, honey. Izuku looked up from his computer. His mother was standing by his door. Just wanted to check up on you. Supper is almost ready. She gave him a smile and walked back towards the kitchen. And there was the guilt. Even though he no longer felt guilty when planning or killing heroes, he did every now and again feel guilty for lying to his mother. She had done so much for him. But he made up for it by putting money into her account. He had gotten a fake raise for her and was adding money to her paycheck. During supper, Izuku was going through a few things while eating. It's so nice to see you so motivated to get into UA. He looked up at his mother, who was smiling warmly. He remembers how upset she had been when he told her that he was not allowed to take the hero course exam. But he had also seen some relief. He didn't blame her. She had seen how badly he got beaten up, and she was obviously worried about how the hero course would treat him. But even so, she had still tried to help him reach his dream, and for that, he was forever grateful. Oh, and the Bakugos have invited us for supper next week. Oh right, his mother and Bakugo's mother are close friends. Great, he was barely managing to avoid Bakugo at school now that he was going to be in his house. He faked a smile, something he had learned to do very well over the past months. Sounds great, Mom. He went back to eating and going over some of his work. Later that evening, he and his mother were sitting in front of the TV watching the news. His mother was doing some knitting, a small side hobby that she had started doing after getting more money. The news wasn't that interesting, mostly just about a small-scale robbery. Izuku was taking notes on the hero who had stopped it. We interpret this with some sad news. The hero was just found dead. It appears that the Quiet One is responsible for this. The crime. Izuku stopped listening. He closed his notebook and got up. How horrible. He faked a devastated voice. Oh, the poor girl. She was such a new hero too. His mother put away her knitting and turned off the TV. I think that's enough for today. She got up and walked to her room. Once she was out of the room, Izuku smiled to himself, another victory. Chapter text. This Quiet One is really making a scene. Did you see his latest victim? Izuku was currently sitting at a large table in the Bakugo household. Sitting across from him was Katsuki, who was giving him a death glare. Please, I could take him on. Those heroes were just weak. Smack. Katsuki's mother hit him over the head. Katsuki, don't you dare speak of the dead like that. Izuku and his mother just watched quietly. Don't you hit me, you bitch. Ah yes, loud and obnoxious as always. Yes, this Quiet One has become quite a problem, hasn't he? He looked to his mother, who was just trying to be polite but was obviously uncomfortable with how Auntie Mitsuki treated Bakugo. So Izuku is trying for UA. Right, they didn't know about those stupid quirkiest requirements. His mother smiled. Oh yes, he's taking the general studies exam. This made the Bakugo surprised. Well-expected Katsuki did look surprised, but it quickly faded to happiness. Oh, I thought you wanted to do the hero course. Oh well, he will have to explain to them. Well, you see, they won't let me. Being quirkless and all. Oh, now they were angry. What? Auntie Mitsuki was very angry. It's okay, really. I've had a change of heart. This obviously didn't convince them, but they dropped it. The next day at school, the bullying got worse. Since hearing that UA's hero course wasn't allowing quirkless in, Bakugo got a huge ego boost. He made sure to rub it into Izuku's face any time he could, and soon every bully was making fun of Izuku's crushed dreams. As the teasing went on, Izuku found himself thinking about how he should just end Bakugo right there and then. But as much as he wanted to kill Bakugo, he knew it wouldn't be strategic. The Quiet One only went after heroes. If a kid was targeted by the Quiet One, it would raise too much suspicion. This would bring in police, and if the one who died has only one person who they tormented, he might as well just hand himself in. Not that it would be hard to kill the guy. He was far too reliant on his quirk, got rid of it, and he wouldn't know what to do. He thinks that just because he has a powerful and flashy quirk, he is invincible. All Izuku would have to do is put something on his hands, nullifying his sweat, preferably something sticky, and then kill him normally. Even using his quirk against him would work and be a nice ironic finish. Put him in a situation where he sweats more, like rising the heat in the room and having the room pumped with pure oxygen. A simple match would send him up in flames. That was a good plan, but he had a much better plan. Something that would be a sweet cold revenge. Cut off his hands. Just completely remove his quirk, make him the very thing he tormented Izuku for. But no, he had to wait. After all, the patience is key, it is always key. And he will wait for the perfect time to act on his plans. But all he had to do for now was listen and be quiet. Chapter text. So this is UA, well, a part of it anyway. Izuku stood in front of the examination center of UA. Around him were students from all over, traveling in groups and chatting amongst themselves. Walking into the venue, he saw Bakugo and did his best to avoid him. He didn't feel like starting drama right now. He was doing well up until he was seated next to him. Oh well, Bakugo would start anything in a room this crowded. The hero at the front, Present Mike, went on to explain how all the practicals were going to work. So this whole thing is like an old-schooled video game. That is quite interesting, and very based. It favors those with flash destructive quirks, so these with non-physical quirks will have a harder time. Now, even though he wasn't doing this practical, and you with the messy hair. Izuku stopped as some kid in flashes pointed at him. You have been muttering the whole time. It is distracting. Oh, he didn't realize he was muttering. Oh, well, time to put on an act. Oh, I am sorry. Ugh, how he hated doing that, but he had to keep up the act. Just as he thought, looking over the test, he could already tell that he would pass easily. As the time started, he went through quickly. An hour before time up, he finished and handed it in. As he left the room, he could hear soft giggles from the other participants. He turned and gave a smile. The invigilator had their back to the door, so didn't see, but those who did quickly turned their heads back to their paper. He didn't blame them. He used one of his creepier smiles. Walking down the hall, he walked into the observation room. Those who weren't doing the practical were allowed to watch. It was a horrible mistake the school could have made, but he wasn't going to complain. He had to sit and wait for an hour, but once the practical started, he took out a clean notebook and started to take down notes. He made sure to sit at the back to avoid anyone sitting next to him. He didn't want some annoying jerk making fun of him. As he was heading to the station, he felt his phone ping. Taking it out, he saw a new text from Jiren. The train pulled in as Izuku closed his phone. Somebody interesting, huh? Well then, this is going to be fun. Chapter text. Izuku. The letter is here. Izuku turned to see his mother holding out a sealed envelope with the UA stamp. Already? Wow, they worked fast. He took the letter, it was heavy. Thanks Mom, I'll open it in my room. A hologram, really? He tore open the envelope and out fell a small hologram disc. It turned on and displayed the voice hero. Congratulations, you passed the test with flying colors. You, my dear listener, have secured a spot in Class 1C. Of course he passed, the test was easy for him. He just needed to know when the year was officially starting and the other details which only the accepted students got. Then, he would have to try to explain how he was able to get into the school since UA would inform Aldera that he was accepted. That was going to be a pain, although it shouldn't be too bad. It will mostly be them accusing him of cheating. Oh Izuku, this also came for you. He turned to see his mother at his bedroom door handing him another envelope. He thanked her and took it. She gave him a smile and closed his door. He quickly looked over the envelope and saw that it was from Jiren. Oh, it must be the thing he asked for from his last strategy hire. He opened the envelope carefully and pulled out the plastic sleeve. Within the sealed transparent sleeve was a bloody hero license. Izuku smiled to himself as he got up. He went to his wardrobe and pulled out a large photo album from the very back. He opened it and flipped to a clean page. Soon after becoming the quiet one, he started to collect souvenirs. The hero licenses from the heroes he kills. He had them sealed as they were when he picked them up from the bodies and put them into this photo album. So far, he has amassed 36 licenses. He proudly slid the hero dude's blood-stained license into a new sleeve and closed the album. So these people are wanting to attack UA, well, more specifically, wanting to kill All Might. Izuku was in the back seat of a black SUV. Next to him sat Jiren, who was explaining the new client. Quite an obnoxious thing if you ask me, but he's offering a lot of money to see you. Killing All Might, that was interesting. Chapter text. Oh, I'm so proud of you. Izuku stood in front of his mom, who was helping him tie his tie. It was the first day, and he felt somewhat embarrassed that he didn't know how to tie one. Thanks, Mom. I should get going if want to catch the train. He gave her a quick hug and quickly grabbed his bag. On the way to the station, he opened his text app on his burner phone. He put away his phone as he approached the station. He got his pass and hopped onto the train that pulled up. The ride was only 15 minutes long. He was just scrolling on his phone when he felt eyes on him. He looked up and saw a man looking at him. The man seemed to be trying to figure out who he was. Izuku immediately recognized the man, him being part of a gang that the Quiet One dealt with a few weeks ago. He knew he wasn't recognizable outside of costume, but he still put on a fake smile and waved to the man, hopefully throwing him off. The man continued to stare for a few more moments before he approached him. Hey kid, you going to UA? The man was obviously trying to get him to talk to see if he was the Quiet One. Izuku put up his fake smile. Oh yeah, I in the General C course. He made sure that his stutter sounded real as he spoke, and he saw the man's suspension fad, and he nodded and moved away. It was not good that he was somewhat recognizable in public to those who had seen him. He will have to work on th. He didn't want his identity revealed just yet. The school wasn't even that impressive. Besides the massive doors, the place looked exactly like any other high school. He found an empty seat by a window and put his stuff down. As everyone filed in and grouped up, chatting amongst themselves, he observed them. Looking out for obvious quirks in each of them, he listened into conversations where people introduced themselves. By the time the homeroom teacher came, and he had gotten a basic idea of what he was dealing with. His homeroom teacher told them what they would be expecting, and then they all filed out to go to orientation. It wasn't much, basically the principal welcoming back old students and welcoming the new ones. He did notice that one class wasn't there, 1A. Apparently their teacher always takes them out to do some SOF quirk assessment. After the orientation, his class headed back to their classroom. Once there his class all sat down in their seats, the teacher asked them to all introduce themselves. He started at the desk by the door and made his way down. Each person stood up, said their name and quirk. When it got to Izuku stood up and introduced himself. Hello, I am Izuku Midoriya. He kept the stuttering to keep up the mask. He sat back down, and some of the other students looked at him, confused as to why he didn't say anything about his quirk. He saw the teacher look at the registration and make a slight face but quickly masked it. Seems he saw that he was quirkle. At least he didn't say anything like every other teacher he had ever had. The rest of the students introduced themselves, and then the class started. Izuku focused on his work but did feel the eyes of some of his classmates digging into him. He decided to just ignore them. The day went slowly. By the end of it, he felt like he hadn't gotten anything useful. That did change when he was walking through the halls with some of his classmates. I am here, and there he was, that stupid smiling man. He did act all excited with his classmates but hated it. A bunch of students started to swarm the hero, and Izuku got out his phone and quickly snapped a picture. Excellent. The client will be happy to know. Jiren 1537. Continue on to the next phase. Izuku smiled and opened his phone email. He got every news outlet email he could find and sent them all the image. All through an anonymous email, with some details. The media will eat this up, swarming the gates of the school trying to get a scoop. It will be a perfect distraction. Mom, I'm home. He entered his apartment to be met with the smell of food. He took off his shoes at the door and put down his school bag. "Oh hello honey, how was the first day?" His mom came out of the kitchen to meet him, embracing him in a hug. "It was good, my classmates are nice." He hugged his mom back. "Do you make food?" "Oh yes, I thought you might be hungry after your first day." She moved back from the hug, smiling warmly at him. She moved back to the kitchen, with Izuku following. The table was all set with some food. It wasn't a full meal, mostly just snacks. It was her way of showing her love, and he appreciated it greatly. He sat down and started to eat. His mother sat down opposite him and also started to eat. As always, the food was good. So did anything happen? He looked up to his mom, who was smiling at him. He noticed that she was rubbing her burn scars, something she did when she was nervous. Must be some news of the Quiet One case that was on the news this afternoon. He felt a pang of guilt as he watched his mother nervously rub her scar. Nothing much, it was more of an introduction day than anything. "Oh that's nice. I am glad you are happy." He felt guilty. He was just going to leave out the part of All Might and also the looks he got when his classmates asked about his quirk. He didn't answer, but the teacher definitely knew and gave a look. It wasn't that noticeable, but he knew what they looked like, so he spotted it almost instantly. It was definitely going to be a long year. Chapter text. As he had expected, the news outlets ate up the information that the number one was teaching at UA, so as he approached the school the next day the front gates were swarming with news reporters. Izuku smiled to himself as he walked into the school. Walking down the halls, he noticed that everyone seemed to stare at him. He brushed it off, but once he got to his classroom he saw the note. Seems like his quirk status got out. Of course the rich pricks at this school would be quirkist. He took the note, read over the rude words, then crumbled it up and threw it into the bin. As he sat down the rest of the class filed in, some shooting him nasty looks and others looks of sympathy. He hated those the most, the people who look at him or apologize to him like his lack of a quirk was some sort of sickness. It sickened him. Once the lesson began, he was able to tune out the whispers and glances. Once the bell rang for lunch period, Izuku had fully clocked onto how many people knew about his quirk, or more specifically lack of one. It seemed that most of the first years had heard of this, so as he walked the halls he could feel the glares and whispers, and as always he just stayed quiet. As he neared the cafeteria, he quickly sent a text to the client that he was in place, and not even a few minutes later the emergency alarms went off. Just as he had expected, all the students panic, some heroes they are. And using the chaos, Izuku was able to slip away. Luckily he was right in thinking all the staff will be out trying to calm the press or the students, so there wasn't anybody to see him as he stalked to the teacher's lounge. He had to avoid cameras of course, but otherwise it was a piece of cake. Once in the lounge he found the hero course scheduled. He quickly snapped a photo of it and left. He quickly found the panicking students and easily blended back in. It was some blue-haired kid with glasses who managed to calm the crowd. Probably from the Iida family, based of those leg jets. Once the panic had calmed, Izuku pulled out his phone and opened the chat with the client. Izuku saw that the client saw the image and saved it. He smiled and closed the chat. Looks like the hero course are going to have some company. Walking back to the cafeteria he got another message, this time from Jiren. The client wants you to come with on the attack. You in? Well, that will be interesting. Izuku thought about it. He did want to come with on the attack, but he saw the schedule and knows that Bakugo would be there. He couldn't risk getting recognized. Although, Izuku smiled to himself and responded to Jiren. Izuku stood in front of the crowd of villains. Well, they couldn't really be called that. They were more common street thugs than villains. He was wearing his villain outfit. It was a simple thing, just some black padded pants, black combat boots and a thick black hoodie, the hood pulled up. He wore a black mouth mask and goggles that provided a whole bunch of vision enhancements, the goggles led of a slight green glow. He stood next to his client, a guy named Tamura Shigaraki. He was telling the street thugs about what they were going to do. There was a man made of a black smoke. He was called Kurogiri. He seemed to be the one who was going to warp everyone to the USJ. Once Shigaraki finished talking, Kurogiri opened a portal of sorts and all the street thugs walked through. Shigaraki walked last, shortly followed by Izuku. Izuku had managed to fake being sick and got a day off by his mother. Since she worked away from the house all day, he was able to sneak out through his bedroom window. As he exited the warp gate, he found himself in a large open dome. Standing at the far end were all the hero students of Class 1A and 2 teachers. That isn't right. There should be 3. He saw Shigaraki glance at him and he just shrugged. One of the teachers leapt forward and started taking out the thugs. Izuku recognized him as Eraserhead. Izuku walked over to Shigaraki and leaned closer to him. Get Kurogiri to warp the students across the arena. He saw that Shigaraki hesitated but then nodded to Kurogiri, who did as he said. You said All Might would be here. Shigaraki was upset. Izuku could tell by his voice and how he scratched at his neck. I did, but it seems there was an element I was not aware of that has been played. Izuku turned to look at Eraserhead, who was taking down the thugs. He turned back to Shigaraki. That is Eraserhead, he erases quirks. The effect ends when he blinks. Crushing his head would also work. How strong is that Nomu of yours? Izuku could see an exciting shine in Shigaraki's eyes before he points at the hero and calls on Nomu. Izuku smiled under his mask and nodded to Kurogiri, who opened a warp gate for him. Just before he steps through, he meets eyes with Eraserhead just before he is caught by the Nomu thing. Izuku then stepped through the warp gate and exited back in the old bar he had first met Shigaraki in. He quickly removed his villain outfit and left the bar. He snuck back into his apartment through his bedroom window. He hid the bag containing his outfit under his bed and quickly made himself look like he was ill. Got to keep up the act after all. He heard his mother come in and he got out of bed. He walked out his room to greet her. She smiled when she saw him. Oh hey, sweetie, how you feeling? You look so much better now. She walked over and hugged him. Yeah, I'm feeling better too. I think it was just a 24-hour bug. He made his voice sound groggy as he hugged his mother back. Oh good, maybe you will be able to go back to school tomorrow. She ruffled up his hair. She walked into the kitchen to put away the groceries she had bought. Izuku shuffled back to his room and flopped onto his bed. He pulled out his phone and opened his messages. He had a new message from Shigaraki. Client 1435. The IDOT finally showed up. He beat Nomu. The other heroes showed up. One shot me. Izuku cringed at how bad the guy's spelling and grammar was. He did manage to make out what was being said. All Might showed up and somehow managed to beat the Nomu thing. Then the other teachers showed up and one, most likely Snipe, shot Shigaraki. Geez, that must beep. Izuku knew that Shigaraki did not have any sort of healing quirk at his disposal, which meant that those shots would have to heal naturally. He closed his messages and opened his phone email. He checked his untraceable account to see if he had any messages. His main request email was managed by Jiren, but any possible clients get sent to this email. At the moment he had no new requests. Wonderful, that meant he could rest for the rest of the day. Chapter text. Oh dear. Izuku looked up from his food. His mother was looking at her phone. Looks like there's no school for the rest of the week. The hero course got attacked by villains and many are in hospital. Hospital, that's good. It means the attack went well in some way. He put on a concerned look. Oh no, are they okay? They aren't releasing details, but it looks like no one died. Damn it, he had hoped Shigaraki had managed to kill at least one student, but no matter, he did everything he got paid to do. Although he had made all the calculations, and yet All Might, the one important piece, was not there. Why was that? There was something he didn't know and he needed to find out. It took 2 days for the full news to get out, which was impressive since the press were skilled in weaseling out news stories. The school must have done a lot to keep it down for as long as they could. The information was simple: a villain group who went by the League of Villains attacked the first-year hero course. He never got the name that Shigaraki was calling his group. If he had, he would have talked him out of the name. League of Villains, what kind of basic name was that? Not to mention it was clearly a knockoff of League of Legends. Several students were badly injured in the attack, but nothing that a few days in hospital with healing quirks couldn't fix. Over the 2 days, Izuku had gotten a new propercidin from Shigaraki, to be an informant. Shigaraki had someone funding him, so he had a lot of money he was offering, but it wasn't about the money for Izuku. He wanted to see All Might and the other quirkest pricks fall, but first he had to get into the hero course. That way he can gather all the information he needed, and his ticket was just around the corner. Before quirks there was the Olympic Games, but those slowly faded out. Now the big event that everyone tunes in for is the UA Sports Festival. All courses participated in these series of games, and he had done some research. If he did well in festival, he would be moved to hero course. It was perfect, he just needed to get at least top 5, there was no way he would get in the top 3 with Bakugo and Todoroki there. During the months of becoming the Quiet One, Izuku had cleaned up the beach near the outside the residential area where he lived. He had needed a way of quickly building muscle, and no gym would take him due to his quirk status. On top of that, he had learnt many different fight styles. Being quirkless and a villain meant he needed a way to fight. The sports festival was in 2 weeks, which gave him time to do some more training. He wasn't that surprised when the school decided not to cancel. Their egos were too big to admit fault, but it made it easier for him. The time for the sports festival come around, and as usual it was busy. He used his ever-growing funds to snag a ticket for his mother, saying it was a prize he had won. The first year started with Bakugo giving a speech, and as Izuku had expected, it was about him. After that, the first event was randomly chosen, which was bullshit. He had seen the robots and obstacle course being set up the week before, and the cavalry battle headbands had been printed the day before. Everything had been planned out beforehand. And as he had expected, the first event was none other than the obstacle course. Well, this was going to be fun. He saw the first problem was the starting line. It was a narrow hallway, which meant that it would become congested very quickly when the event started. So once the start sounded off, he jumped up and clung to the walls, a small trick he had learnt. He did wall-to-wall jumps as the floor got frozen, trapping many of the students. That must be the Todoroki kid. Once he got out of the hall, he saw the robots. They were all big ones. As the robots lunged forward, the Todoroki kid froze them. Clever. The way he had frozen them meant that they were unbalanced, and they all toppled. Izuku dodged and weaved through the falling debris. He grabbed a large metal plate which would be useful later on, and used the hanging wire to secure it to his back. The next obstacle was a pitfall. It was simple but a difficult obstacle. Others used their quirks to leap over, but he had to crawl across the ropes. That meant he was put quite far behind. He wanted to get a nice high place, but not in the top 3. He knows that those places would be targeted in the next round. Once he had gotten past the pitfalls, he saw the next challenge. A minefield. The mines didn't seem powerful enough to hurt anyone, just causes an inconvenience. But more of anything would make it stronger. He took the large metal plate off his back. He knew it would have come in handy, and started using it to dig up the mines. He dug them from the bottom to not set them off, and carefully put them in a pile. Once he had a large-looking pile, he jumped onto them, using the metal to protect him as he flew forward. He saw he passed most of the students, and was near the 2 front ones. Damn it, he didn't want to get in the top 3. Didn't matter at this point. He landed just in front Bakugo and Todoroki. He made it look like he was slightly dazed so that the 2 would pass him. He then started half running after them and finished in 3rd place, with Todoroki in 2nd and Bakugo in 1st. He had hoped for a 10 or 11 place, although 3rd did look impressive and would make it more likely for him to be moved to hero course. What the hell was that? His shirt was suddenly grabbed by Bakugo. Of course he would be angry. Oh well, time to put up the weak stuttering idiot act. What do you mean, Kaken? He had to force himself to use the stupid nickname he had given Bakugo. Bakugo, why are you so angry? You won. The Todoroki boy came up behind Izuku. Nothing. Bakugo pushed Izuku away from him and stalked off, obviously angry. You're from General Studies, right? Todoroki turned to Izuku. Oh, yeah. I am trying to get into Hero though. He made himself fidget with his hands to make himself look more anxious. It ended up working as Todoroki just nodded and walked away. Damn, he hated having to put up this stupid act, but he had to hold out. It wasn't time for the reveal just yet. After the rest of the 40 students that would go on to the next round crossed the finish, they went on to announce what was next, and as Izuku had expected, it was a cavalry battle. The event was explained and it was simple enough, then the points were revealed. He smiled to himself when he saw that he was correct in thinking that first place would be targeted, with 1,000 points. He wandered around Abbott trying to find a group, but most people already knew that he was quirkless and avoided him. Damn, did they not just see him get third place? Oh well. He saw a brown-haired girl talking to a boy with a bird head and he decided to go to them. Hey, I was wondering if we could team up. He hoped that they either didn't know that he was quirkless or didn't care. Oh, you're the one who got third. Sure you can. What do you think, Tokiyami? The girl was joyful with her response and turned to the other boy whose name seemed to be Toyoyami. The boy nodded and then someone leaned onto Izuku's shoulder. He turned to see who it was and it was a pink-haired girl with yellow eyes. Can I join? Name's Mei Hatsume. She talked fast and moved her hands a lot. The brown-haired girl nodded her head. Hatsume smiled big at the answer. Oh wonderful, I want you to test all my babies. She looked directly into Izuku's eyes and moved really close to him. Babies. What was this crazed girl talking about? Yes, I want everyone to see my babies so that I can get a great internship. Oh, this girl was a support student, but why would she call her inventions babies? Sounds great. Oh, and I'm Uraraka by the way. Izuku turned to look at the brown-haired girl, realizing that he didn't get her name before. And you? All three turned to him. Right, he hadn't said yet. Oh, right, I'm Izuku M. Midoriya. There was a flash of emotion on all their faces. Uraraka looked disgusted but quickly changed it. Hatsume looked excited for some reason and Tokiyami actually didn't change his expression. You're the quirkless one. Hatsume squealed in excitement. Yeah, you're perfect. A blank canvas. Oh, that was not the reaction he was expecting. He saw that Uraraka was about to say something but she was interrupted by the sound that the event was about to begin. They hadn't yet decided on what they were doing, so they quickly got into some sort of position and he had somehow ended up on top. The match was chaos. As expected, everyone went after Bakugo. He told his teammates that that would be a horrible idea and that they should turn their focus towards the smaller points first. He saw Uraraka roll her eyes but she listened so he ignored it. There was only about a minute left and they were in a good fourth place. The top headband seemed to be passed between the team that Todoroki was on and Bakugo's team. Well, he will just let them fight it out. The time ran out and they had managed to stay in the fourth place. That meant that they all would move to the next round. Now things would be difficult. Hitoshi Shinso, Izuku recognized him. He was in the same class as he was. He remembers that his quirk was brainwash. He could take control of anyone if they answer him. It was a powerful quirk but had a massive weakness as well. If his opponent knew about his quirk, it would be harder to get them to answer him. He stepped up to the fight stage. The rules were simple. Get your opponent out of the line or make them unable to continue fighting. His best shot was to get Shinso out of the line. Midnight called out that the match started and Shinso immediately tried to get Izuku to answer him. So what's it like being quirkless? Izuku just rolled his eyes as he charged towards Shinso. He knows that this kid had never learned to fight. Like everyone else, he relied on his quirk. Besides, he's trying to get someone who's known as the quiet one to talk. The fight was pathetic. Shinso was only able to throw a few weak punched and loose insults. Izuku was able to throw him out of the line and walked away with the win. As he walked up to the area reserved for students, Shinso came up to him. Hey, well done. Izuku just nodded and continued walking up to the seats. He quickly grabbed his analysis book and a pen. There were still several matches before his next, so he wanted to get as much about these students as possible. The match after his was Todoroki and a guy named Siro. The matchup was horrible as Todoroki just made a massive ice wall trapping the guy, ending the match in seconds. Looks like he was going to have a hard time in his next match. The other matches were great. He was getting so much information, although he had to hang back to avoid eyes. Before he knew it, he was up against Todoroki. He had analysis ed the match that Todoroki did first. He attacked big and only used ice even though he could also use fire. Must be something to do with his father. He had seen a lot of Endeavor and could see he was an asshole. He would have to dodge the ice wall when the match starts and try catch him by surprise. He watched carefully as he walked up to the match, and as midnight started the countdown he saw Todoroki start to move. It looked like the ice wall would be bigger on his left, so he would go that way to avoid detection. Start. He jumped to the side as the ice come racing towards him. He grabbed a chunk and ran along it. He heard Todoroki make a noise of surprise as he disappeared behind the ice. He jumped on it and ran along, jumping at Todoroki. He knew he would let out more ice, so he lunged to the right, throwing the chunk of ice at him. Todoroki reflexes and shoots ice at the chunk flying at him, and Izuku shoved him back while he was distracted. Todoroki started to fall back but turned to fight back, so Izuku kicked out his legs and grabbed his arm, throwing him out of the line. Todoroki looked up at Izuku with surprise as Midnight called the end of the match, her voice having a hint of surprise too. He stood against Bakugo now. He knows that he was not going to win and Bakugo was angry, so he was going to go all out. So when the match started, Bakugo charged at him, explosions going off in his hands. Izuku had no desire to win this match. He had impressed the teachers enough, so when Bakugo was close enough to set off an explosion, he let himself get thrown back. He didn't reach the line, so he decided to try and throw a few punches. These were blocked and he was sent flying by an explosion to his chest. He hit the wall of the arena, which hurt, and the end of the match was called. He must have hit his head because he lost consciousness. He slowly started to wake and was met with harsh fluorescent lights. He slowly sat up and found himself in the nurse office. The small old lady who he recognized as Recovery Girl was sitting on a chair talking to the principal, who turned to him as he sat up. "Oh, hello, you're awake." The mouse jumped down from the chair he was sitting on and walked over to the bed where Izuku was laying. "You're just in time for the prize giving. We did push it back a bit for you. Also, I would like to say your performance was impressive and I would like to offer you a spot in the hero course." "It was that easy, huh?" That would be great. Thank you, sir." He hated having to act so polite and formal to this guy. The mouse nodded and walked out the nurse office, stopping at the door waiting for him. Izuku was giving his shirt and he quickly headed out the nurse room and followed the mouse to where the others were. Bakugo was chained up and was acting feral. The bird-headed boy, Tokiyami, was also there trying to avoid eye contact with Bakugo. Izuku was led to stand next to Bakugo, who glared at him, and then the floor rose up. Izuku found himself back in the arena. Midnight was there and she was announcing who would be presenting the medals. Oh beep, it better not be, crash. And there he was, the primary colored He-Man. He forced a smile as the crowd cheered. First Tokiyami was given his bronze medal, then All Might walked over to him. He placed the silver medal around his neck and just as Izuku thought he would walk away, he gave him a hug and a pat on the back. Being unexpected, Izuku tensed up but forced himself to relax and not deck the man in the face. All Might thankfully moved on to hand Bakugo his gold medal. This process was long and difficult since Bakugo refused to take the medal. Once it was finally around his neck, everyone cheered for them and then they could all go home. Well, everyone besides the winners, him and the other two had to stay for photos. The photos were awkward since people were asking about the other two's quirks, but when they come to ask him, he noticed some of the teachers were shaking their heads and trying to change the conversation. He also learned that the Iida kid was actually meant to be there but had family matters to attend to. Izuku wondered what it could have been. Once all that mess was finished, Izuku was about to leave when he was stopped by the principal and All Might. "Come with us, please." The mouse walked with All Might in tow, expecting Izuku to follow, which he did. They walked towards a staff room and he was asked to take a seat. The mouse poured some tea for him, All Might and himself. "We would like to talk to you about something," the mouse said after taking a sip of his tea. He then turned to All Might, who cleared his throat. "Well, young man, your performance during the festival was quite impressive and I would like to make an offer." Izuku had wondered if this was going to be some sort of apology for what happened when they first met, but it seems that this He-Man didn't even remember him, but no matter, he would hear what this smiling buffoon had to say. He took a sip of tea as All Might spoke. "I want to give you my quirk." To be continue. I hope you enjoyed this story. Also remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.